The scary prospect for every company owner, manager or director is that a cyber attack is now a matter of when and not if. Indeed, future attacks might already have been built into your systems that say companies, governments or departments have already installed. And the evidence of this is the recent attack on Hezbollah by Israeli security forces, which turned apparently innocent pages into explosive devices. Now, that's an extreme example, I know, but it could be real in any business or government department right now. Well, Glenn Maiden is the Director of Threat Intelligence Operations at Fortinet's FortiGuard Labs, one of the largest threat intelligence organisations in the world. And I spoke with him a little earlier.
Yeah, it's very, very easy, Ross, to mount an attack these days. And because our systems are so interconnected, it only takes one minor little touch to potentially cause a whole bunch of damage. So if you think of when you turn the tap on in your kitchen in the morning, or when you go out to fill up your car full of petrol to come into work, we couldn't go for very long without some of these essential services being shut down due to a cyber attack without experiencing quite significant ramifications.
So say, for example, I know that with AUKUS, say, for example, in the future submarines, that even now there is planning to have really every microchip sourced back to its base so that they catalogue every element of every part of what are going to be very complex machines. Is this the sort of thing that every company now needs to consider for its own protection in the future?
I think it's something that they should be thinking about. I know certainly my company, Fortinet, we trace the components all the way through to the assembly, to the manufacturing, all the way to when it gets put into a box and delivered to the customer. So yeah, we want to make sure we've got that chain of custody all the way from the hardware, which could potentially be tampered with, as we saw in the Hezbollah example, through to the software, which is probably a bigger risk because that can be done without actually having to have physical proximity to some of these systems and devices.
Okay, but is it potential that almost it's too late, that the problems are already inbuilt, awaiting sort of the unlocking by either hackers or other state-sponsored sort of, if you like, extremists? You don't quite know where the threat might come from in the future.
No, it's a great question, and I've been thinking about this idea of hybrid warfare and cyber-enabled attacks and cyber attacks for quite some time. And you're quite right. At the moment, we could have some very, very serious adversaries in our critical infrastructure systems. At the moment, they're probably just doing espionage. They're stealing some of our secrets, but that could very easily have that access that's pre-positioned pivot into an attack at a later date when the geopolitical tensions get to that point.
So was the CrowdStrike outage, even though that may have been a fault and an update fault, could have that been a very good example of the sort of disruption that could occur if you get a state-sponsored actor trying to be malicious inside any particular country's systems? CrowdStrike was a little bit different because that was just a bug. It wasn't actually a cyber incident. But if you think back to the SolarWinds attack a couple of years ago, the Russian threat actors in that case got all the way into the US Department of Energy and a whole bunch of defence suppliers. So absolutely, that was a long attack where they spent months and months and months, if not years, to get into some of these suppliers who weren't even the target. The target was US defence and US government. But the reality is there's going to be collateral damage. Collateral damage is the outage of systems that affect people. And given the fact that now our money, our finances is increasingly online, it's not actual physical. So this is the reality of the future if all of a sudden systems are shut down for any prolonged period.
Yeah, and that's what we saw in the criminal space, not so much on the cyber threat actor space, but they realised a while back that they can make a lot of money not just by stealing our data and then selling that back to us or ransoming that back to us or even our competitors. But if they take out one of our banking systems or one of our port systems and have boats floating around on our coast for a couple of days, that can be billions and billions of dollars and a big incentive for us to pay that ransom to get access to our systems again really quick.
One thing that sort of strikes me is that those people who are the threats, that their costs are relatively small as compared with their potential returns. So the incentive is there for these bad actors to continue to act and to continue to innovate. And as you get more artificial intelligence, Of course, you're getting bigger data centres, more complex data centres. There's more incentive for them to be even better at their job.
It's one of the scary parts about a cyber attack. If you think of the rockets flying around the Middle East at the moment, a cyber attack is much cheaper, much easier. It's a lot easier to attribute to somebody else. And I don't have to be very close to you. I don't have to be within that sort of, kilometre range. I can, if I was a threat actor, whether it's North Korea or Iran, and they wanted to attack us here in Australia, they could quite happily launch that attack from overseas, and it could be just as devastating.
OK, so then when it comes down to company directors or managers or whatever it is, who are trying to sort of, if you like, have some form of control over this, the reality is there's very little control you might have unless you try and build the back end, the defences that you require. But you've got to be absolutely vigilant to understand that this is a genuine business risk.
You are quite right. And I think in some cases, prevention is the only cure. The good thing from my perspective, especially being in that sort of threat space, in the threat intelligence space, the threats are changing all the time. But what we've been doing in cybersecurity for 25, 30 years, a lot of the defensive type of strategies haven't change too much and don't need to. We still have to have role-based access. We still need to keep our systems up to date. We still need to have defence in depth. So I think if we focus on getting the things right that we know that we can do, we're practiced, there's nothing new in there, we can make ourselves a lot more resilient to some of these ever-emerging and changing threat environments.
It is often said that war zones are the great test of defences and of attacking sort of, if you like, arms. Is it a case where Ukraine or what's taking place in the Middle East right now gives you a sense of the type of attacks that could come from places such as Russia or from Iran or Hezbollah, wherever it might be? Are there actually now advances being created in the defences as a result of those wars?
Well, I think I watched the invasion of Ukraine very, very closely, and watching sort of some of the physical and the kinetic parts of that campaign, and then lining that up to some of the destructive wiper malware that was also sort of let loose into the Ukrainian environment as part of that invasion. There was a real correlation in terms of when there was activities as part of the military, they were absolutely in synchronisation with the cyber activities. It is an absolute, they say it's the fifth dimension of warfare now. It is well practiced and well part of some of these malicious state campaigns now.
Glenn Maiden from FortiGuard Labs, part of Fortinet. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ross.